The perks of power. The perks of power. For Democrats right now, the perks of power apparently include covering up a potential crime that we all saw that is obviously wrong, but somehow they're getting away with it. I can't get this off my mind, folks, and I'm going to be staying with this. I'm sorry, but I'm talking about the killing of Ashli Babbitt that we all saw on January 6th. We had Aaron Babbitt on last night. I could not play this in his presence, but I will show you now what happened on January 6th again. Ashli Babbitt, a 35-year-old Trump supporter, was unarmed that day, unarmed, and she was shot and killed. Now, we can talk and try to figure out what rules and laws she may or may not have broken, but we know that she was unarmed. We know that she did not pose a lethal threat to anyone. I also know this. I've talked to a lot of law enforcement sources, both current and retired. There is not a police department in the country where this shooting would have been seen as a justified use of deadly force. Not one. And the Capitol Hill Police, they still are part of this country, and they report to the people. Something's not right here. We need the name of the officer who pulled the trigger. I talked to Aaron Babbitt, the husband of Ashli, last night.
For all intents and purposes, I guess it's just not sexy enough to fit the narrative that's going on right now. They're just lambasting her on social media and mainstream news. The term insurrectionist keeps getting thrown around, rioter. To me, she was just a blue-collar American veteran that wanted her voice to be heard, and nobody was listening.
She was no insurrectionist. I'll get to that in a moment. But again, who pulled the trigger? Because this was not justified. No police department in the country would say this was justified, and even Congress itself cannot say this is justified. The George Floyd criminal justice bill that they're so proud that the House passed and Joe Biden has been pushing, this is what it says about a use of force. A federal law enforcement officer may not use deadly force against a person unless the form of deadly force used is necessary as a last resort to prevent imminent and serious bodily injury or death to the officer or another person. That condition has not been met. Clearly, you see it, I see it, anyone who's watched that video knows. Yet somehow, just because Nancy Pelosi did what politicians do, they fired the guy in charge.
I am calling for the resignation of the chief of the Capitol Police, Mr. Sund, and I have received notice from Mr. Irving that he will be submitting his resignation.
Just fire the guy in charge, and that's it. That's it. Well, it worked for the media. It doesn't work for me. It doesn't work for you. Got me thinking a little bit more about Nancy Pelosi and other top Democrats. Nancy has been at the upper realms of American society her entire life. Here she is as a teenager with John F. Kennedy. Nancy Pelosi probably didn't mix with cops much as a kid. Maybe she learned a few lessons about law enforcement from John F. Kennedy. He had his talents, but let's face it, sometimes the Secret Service had to arrange play dates for him at the White House pool with young ladies, at the pool and elsewhere. I don't think she has much respect for law enforcement. I can see that by how she's handled this case. What about Chuck Schumer? He went into political office at the age of 24, right after getting out of Harvard Law School. Are these two people who think a lot about cops, who think a lot about how it works over the years? Are they? I'm not so sure. And somehow they have convinced the world, they and their friends, that what happened on January 6th was, the worst thing possibly that ever happened in history since the Civil War.
And this was the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War.
The assault that was made on our democracy today.
They hunted us at the Capitol. It was an insurrection. It was an act of terror.
A bloodthirsty mob attacked the Capitol.
This was one of the worst attacks on our democracy in our history, not in our modern history, in our total history.
Think about what we just lived through in January 6th, a treasonous insurrection.
This temple to democracy was desecrated.
And so this is very much an attack, a violent attack on our democracy.
The worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War.
Exploitation, exaggeration, and quite frankly, it all adds up to a bunch of lies, a bunch of lies. You saw what happened on January 6th. It was terrible. It was a protest that got out of hand, okay? A protest that got out of hand. Was it worse than 9/11? September 11th, 2001, where nearly 3,000 people were lost? 4 different airplanes were hijacked, crashed into that building, the Pentagon, and Pennsylvania. Was what happened on January 6th worse than that? It wasn't. And actually, here's proof. Here is total proof. All right, yes, it got crazy at times, but here's the proof. Inside the Capitol, later that night, they were able to resume business. They got on with it. The electoral count, that actually happened inside the building. They were able to continue a matter of hours later. They didn't have to rebuild the Capitol. It didn't take them 3 years. They had to clean it up. And remember, only one person was killed that day, and it was Ashli Babbitt, a Trump supporter. And they still don't have the decency to tell us who pulled the trigger. Now, you think that's unfair on the cop? It isn't. I'll get to that in a moment. Let's go through some recent controversial police shootings where all hell broke loose, okay? Minneapolis, okay, we all know Officer Chauvin and George Floyd. They burned the city down almost. They did millions and millions and millions of dollars worth of damage, destroying businesses. More recently, Dante Wright, all hell broke loose again. This happens and it's accepted and it hurts people. It destroys lives and businesses and property, but it's just accepted. And in each of these cases, by the way, over the years and just a couple of weeks ago, we always find out the name of the cop right away. Right away, we are told the name of the officer involved in whatever is making people mad, often justifiably mad, but we find out the name of the cop right away, right? Here's a bunch, a half dozen or so, we find out their names right away. But not in this case, not in Ashli Babbitt's case. Why is that? And this, again, was not a justified shooting. Absolutely not. Here's the big thing, though. Notice anything about Ashli? Take a good look. And let's look at some of the pictures of her that her husband furnished Newsmax. She lived a great life. And again, a veteran, went to Afghanistan and Iraq, okay? Notice anything? She's Caucasian. That's a big part of this, folks. It really is. A dozen years ago, this would not have been a factor. This was a different country in 2009, 2008. Let's switch gears, okay? I want to have fun for 30 seconds, okay? Who remembers this song?
All the single ladies, all the single ladies, all the single ladies, all the single ladies. Now put your hands up in the club, just go.
All the single ladies. All the single ladies. Everybody loved this song, right? Not me, but everybody loved this song. Big at the weddings. Beyonce was beloved by all, and she seemed to love all of us. Remember the Grammys just a couple of weeks ago? Really changed her tune. Everybody has changed their tune.
So I wanted to uplift, encourage, and celebrate all of the beautiful Black queens and kings that continue to inspire me and inspire the whole world.
Being a white guy right now is not considered very fashionable. The only thing less fashionable than that is being a white woman. You're feeling it. I know you are. It's just not considered very cool. And the mob is coming after you. That's why I think maybe a lot of them are joining the mob. They are joining the mob, white women in particular. That's part of how mobs work, okay? Join us, or else you'll be in trouble. That's happening, folks. That's happening in a big way. So once again, I think it's a very reasonable request to find out the name of this officer, to see everything about this case, everything about this case. Why was Ashli Babbitt shot and killed when she was unarmed and her hands, free of any weapon, were in clear sight? That's fair. We demand it. As a matter of fact, I ask you to join me. I've written a letter. You can write your own, but I'm sending this right now to every member of Congress, 535. This is going to cost about $300 in stamps, but that's okay. And here's the letter. Dear member of Congress, I'll fill that in specifically. We want the name of the officer who killed Ashli Babbitt inside the Capitol on January 6, 2021 to be released publicly. As you know, she was unarmed and was not posing a deadly threat to anyone. As you also know, the use of deadly force is prohibited except when used to prevent serious bodily injury or death to the officer or another person. This is the standard in every state. And that is also the standard set forth in the George Floyd Criminal Justice Act that you voted for. Just about every Democrat voted for. Thank you for your attention. We expect you to move promptly on this matter by releasing the name of the officer who shot Ashli Babbitt. Thank you. Signed, Greg Kelly. I ask you to join me.
You just watched Newsmax TV, America's fastest growing cable news channel, now in more than 70 million homes. You can get Newsmax TV on your cable system or check your cable guide. And if your system doesn't carry Newsmax, call them, tell them you want Newsmax TV, because we're real news for real people.